You're watching US Mystery Tales. Subscribe so you won't miss the next chilling story. It was the last week of October when I arrived in Ashbrook, a town that seemed determined to fold in on itself. The station platform was nearly empty, the air sharp with the smell of wet leaves and wood smoke. Ashbrook wasn't on many maps anymore. People who lived outside Massachusetts rarely knew it existed. But a string of envelopes with no return address had made sure I did. The first letter had been vague: if you want a real story, come to Ashbrook. People vanish here. I'd laughed at it, tossed it aside. But the second one had a name. Margaret Ellis, 27, missing since September. The third letter contained nothing but a photograph, grainy, black and white, of the Ashbrook State Hospital, its windows dark, its roofline jagged as broken teeth. By then, I was hooked. Curiosity has always been my curse. The town itself looked tired, worn down by years of silence. Houses leaned toward one another as though whispering secrets, their shutters hanging crooked. The main street was dotted with businesses that barely seemed alive: a diner with a flickering neon sign, a hardware store with dusty windows, a church whose bell tower leaned a little too far east. I walked through town with my bag slung over my shoulder, trying not to feel the way eyes followed me from behind curtains. Strangers weren't welcome here. They never were in small towns, but in Ashbrook it was different: less suspicion, more fear. At the motel, a single-story building with peeling paint, the receptionist gave me a once-over before sliding a key across the counter. She was middle-aged, her hair dyed too dark, her lipstick smudged. When I asked about Margaret Ellis, her hands froze on the register. "You a cop?" she asked. "Reporter," I said. "Boston Herald." Her mouth twisted, not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. "Cops don't come here anymore. Not after the last one went missing." I waited for her to laugh, to brush it off as a joke. She didn't. That night in the motel, I couldn't sleep. The wind made the siding creak like footsteps in the hall. At 3 in the morning, the phone rang once, then went dead. When I picked up, all I heard was static, but I swear, beneath it, there was the faint rhythm of breathing. The next morning, I started asking around. Most people brushed me off. Some just turned and walked away. But an old man on the corner of Main Street stopped whittling his block of wood long enough to look me in the eye. "You came for the hospital," he said flatly. I didn't answer, but he went on anyway. "Everyone does. They don't all come back." When I asked what he meant, he shook his head and turned his gaze to the ground. His hands trembled as he carved, and his lips moved as though he were praying. By the time I found myself at the edge of town, the sun was already sinking. The hospital loomed on a hilltop, framed by skeletal trees. Up close, it was worse than in the photograph. Its red brick walls were blackened with mildew, windows shattered or boarded up. The front gates hung from twisted hinges. I climbed the path, each step heavier than the last. The closer I got, the colder the air seemed to grow. By the time I reached the entrance, my breath puffed visibly in front of me. Inside, the silence was thick, broken only by the occasional drip of water. My flashlight beam played across cracked tiles, rusted gurneys, and doors that hung half open like crooked jaws. The walls were stained, not just with water, but with something darker, something that looked too much like dried handprints. In one hallway, the paint had been scratched away in frantic marks, gouges that spelled out nothing coherent but spoke of desperation. I ran my fingers across them, trying to imagine the nails that had made them, the terror that had driven someone to claw at stone walls. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. Slow, steady, measured, coming from deeper in the building. I froze, my pulse hammering. "Hello." My voice cracked against the walls. The footsteps stopped. I turned the corner, and that was when I saw them, footprints in the dust. Barefoot. Small. Leading toward a door with a rusted sign above it, Ward C. I hesitated only a moment before pushing it open. The door groaned, and a cold draft spilled into the hall. Inside, the room was vast, filled with broken furniture, shadows stretching into corners where my flashlight couldn't reach. In the center of the floor sat an object that didn't belong, a tape recorder. A slip of paper was taped to it. 2 words, press play. My hand shook as I reached for the button. The machine whirred, then crackled with static. And then, a voice. A woman's voice, faint and strained, but unmistakably human. My name is Margaret Ellis. If someone finds this, I don't know how much time I have. The hospital isn't just abandoned. It's alive. It watches. It waits. And once you step inside. The tape cut to static. I pulled the recorder closer, trying to hear more. But beneath the static, for the briefest second, I heard something else. Breathing. Not from the tape. From behind me. This was the end of part 1 of Whispers of Ashbrook. Subscribe to US Mystery Tales so you won't miss part 2 of this chilling story.